Hello, I'm Peter Towers, Managing Director and founder of ESS BIZTOOLS. Welcome to the ESS BIZTOOLS Accountants Minute podcast. Today I want to talk to you about let's talk business, not just tax. I think this is the theme of what a lot of people are talking about at present, about how accountants can provide a broader range of advisory services to assist our SME clients to survive and thrive, and for some of them to scale up to be large businesses. Do you ever think about this? What more can accountants do? Every one of us was trained on a range of issues. Double entry bookkeeping, preparation of budgets, some corporate governance activities, taxation, of course, working in a team, costings, and looking at costings, opening bank accounts, communicating to team and to other advisors. Yet the speciality in Australia for at least the last 40 years has been basically delivery of tax returns. Some firms do audits and others obviously do financial planning. But the missing ingredient, I think, is in the middle, that day-to-day advice, that support, being a sounding board for business operators with ideas relating to financial, commercial, management accounting issues, which is what we believe at ESS BIZTOOLS are the key ingredients of advisory services. If we don't provide this service to SME clients, who is going to provide it? Because if there is another group, perhaps that's where people like myself and others who are offering services to assist accountants to deliver advisory services should be focusing. But in all honesty, I cannot think of another group. But in that group, I include bookkeepers and business advisors. And I know there are some other people who have developed business experience, but what they're bringing to the table is their business experience, not their taxation knowledge. And it's that business experience and knowledge and the ability to talk about it and communicate to your clients that's very important to help SMEs survive. So when developing our product package that really started 26 years ago, I've concentrated on making sure that there were communication tools. It wasn't just a matter of producing product packages to do with debtors management, to do with succession planning, to do with research and development, to do with business plans and budgets and cash flow forecasts. They're very important, of course. But based on my own experience, having been a practicing accountant, senior partner of an accounting firm, but in the middle of that, I was the chief financial officer and company secretary of a listed public company. So I really saw how the big end of town operated. And I think the big end of town run their corporations along the lines they believe that SMEs operate, but they're wrong. Not in their attitude and how they do it, but they're wrong in their assumption that SMEs already do it. They don't. And the missing ingredient is, in a larger corporation, there is someone with a title like Chief Financial Officer. And then there are a whole group of accountants, some with special titles to do with accounting. And that group of people are, in the main, there to service whatever industry group their corporation happens to be involved in. And answering the what-if questions, the costing questions, the financial questions. What's our alternative? The corporate governance type questions. We've got a new executive starting. Can you brief him on corporate governance practices? So we concentrated on developing that. So we have a special training package for firms, which we suggest our clients make sure that any new team members go through. And obviously the whole lot hopefully go through it when they first join us as a subscriber. Because we believe accountants need to change their image from being just the tax person to being the business all-rounder, the key advisor, who can answer questions on a whole range of issues and guide clients. I think it starts with Business Plus. Now, Business Plus is a monthly newsletter that we produce, upload to our website. I produce a special video for our subscribers talking about the subjects we've discussed in that edition of Business Plus. And there's normally 4 to 6 articles spread over a wide spectrum of issues that might be of interest to SMEs. I don't want to write all about succession planning in a complete edition because some people will not be interested in succession planning. So we try to pick separate articles. And what our suggestion then is that the follow-up is that the accountant makes contact with the clients that he or she have identified who might be interested in a particular subject matter. It might be the preparation of budgets and cash flow forecasts. It might be what's the results out of those cash flow forecasts. Does that show that later in the year your business is going to enter into some cash flow problems because of capital expenditure that you're planning to undertake, or a very significant research and development project, and you won't get any tax breaks or cash flow directly or indirectly inserted from the federal government until the next financial year? What are you going to do about that? Do you want to borrow money? Have you got security for loans? Or could your client be interested in crowdsourced funding equity raising? Is their turnover under $20 million? And if so, what are you going to talk to them about? Does your client still think that your only speciality is income tax? If so, you're going to need a series of dot points to sit down and have a conversation with your client. And that's what we have developed within the SME Needs Analysis. Dot points on a whole range of subject matters that you can talk to your client about. And in having those conversations, you will convey to your client that you know a lot more about business matters than what they'd assumed. They thought you were just a walking encyclopedia on tax. Now, you may well be that, and I hope you are, but there's other skills that you have, isn't there? You can assist them in implementing a whole range of strategies so they can better run their businesses. Because your clients are looking for someone to talk to. They're looking for feedback on a whole range of issues. I saw what the CEO of a listed public company asks for day in, day out. Always something. I often wondered whether he slept at all, to be honest. But I would get questions. Pete, what do you think about this? Pete, can we have a look at this? Could you do a new costing exercise on this? Now, I didn't do them all. I had a couple of accountants in head office working for me, and I had 13 around Australia also working for us. And we would farm it out at times and get a proposal, looking at the alternatives that were available to us. And I'd feed them back into the CEO. And then half an hour later, I might have had a variation question put to me. We do the exercises on this. Who do your clients who are running SME businesses have these conversations with? because no one will convince me that it's only CEOs of listed public companies that ask these questions. My CEO had 12 leadership team members at head office in various portfolios. I was one of them. I was probably the only outsider in that industry. The rest of them were experts in the industry. We were part of the meat industry. We're a very large company. So we had feedlot, we had properties, cattle properties, we had livestock transport, we had butcher shops, we had small goods factories, we had very large meatworks, all different types of business operations. So at head office, we had experts in those various portfolios. They were the general managers of those areas. And yet, the CEO was able to keep me occupied from 1 to 2 hours a day, sometimes to 10 hours a day, basically going through the questions or sitting down with him, nutting them out, developing policies, drafting documentation, reviewing legal agreements or joint venture agreements that we were debating. Who do your clients ask those questions to? Where do they get that input from? I don't think they do. And I think that's part of the reason why we have these major problems in SMEs at present all around Australia. Failure rate is growing in SMEs. Our clients are subjected to high interest rate, high inflation, a lot of uncertainty. I don't think the result of the federal election has created any certainty to our SME clients. There's a lot of unknowns. There's still a lot of rumours floating around, which unfortunately I don't believe were answered in the election campaign. So the strategy on Business Plus is you send the latest edition to Business Plus to your clients. You then ring them, say, would you like to have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or maybe something a wee bit stronger? And we'll sit down and have a yarn. I wouldn't charge for that hour because if you ask the questions along the lines I'm suggesting, you'll get work from it. As I always did. My team members didn't really like me going out on these exercises when I was running an accounting firm because I'd always come back with a pile of work. So use the SME Needs Analysis as a broader advisory-led discussion. So what's in the SME Needs Analysis that our subscribers obviously have to use? Well, we start up with questions. Well, how's business going? Are you happy with the performance? Are you happy with the gross profit percentage that's been achieved? Or do you think there could have been more sales? And get the response. Just sit there then and listen to your client. Now, a lot of your clients might express a bit of a surprise. They've never really had this discussion with you before. You've only ever talked to them about tax. Talk to them about some of the key performance indicators and how they compare to the past, the business metrics. Again, they might be surprised. Because I've struck situations where accountants are not discussing things like debtors' days outstanding with their clients. I had a situation a few years ago when I was running a series on corporate governance that Oz Industry had hired me to do in various parts of Queensland. And in that discussion, I mentioned that directors needed to be aware of the debtors balance and the debtors days outstanding. And a hand went up. The lady at the back of the room, there's about 45 people present, said to me, well, what should the debtors days outstanding be? I said, well, what's yours? She said, I don't know. I don't know how to calculate it. I said, oh, and I looked at the back of the room and the caterers were getting morning tea ready. And I thought, oh, we'll have a break. We'll have a cup of coffee. So I said, let's have a break. So I went up to this lady and I said, what's your position? She said, I'm the office manager. Oh, okay. And don't you know your debtors days outstanding? No. Do you know your debtors balance? Yeah, she knew the debtors balance. I said, what is it? She told me. I thought, oh, okay. And I said, well, what's your turnover? And she told me the turnover, and I did the calculation. She must have seen my frown on my face. And she said, is that high? I said, very high. 102 days. I said, hasn't anyone ever talked to you about this? No. Who owns the business? She said, my father. I said, does he ever get cranky on you when the bank manager rings him? I said, I can see why. I said, who are your accountants? And she rapped off the name of an accountant. I happen to know that particular firm and that gentleman. I said, doesn't he ever talk to you about debtors' days outstanding? No, and he stipulates he gives no advice or no indication on anything to do with the balance sheet. But geez, this is not very good. I happened to run into that gentleman 3 or 4 weeks later in a cafe. And he said, hi, I hear you've been out in such and such a town talking to, I said, yeah, and I had a good yarn to her. She asked questions about debtors' days outstanding, and he just looked at me. And I said, she doesn't know the debtors' days outstanding for her business? He said, no, neither do I. I said, did you calculate it? I said, no, got nothing to do with a tax return. I'll never forget that conversation. Nothing to do with the tax return. I think it's got a lot to do with business, though. And it's business that's important. Tax returns don't run the business. And that was perfectly set then. So I got asked to take on an assignment. So we did a bit of work for that particular firm. And we got that debtors' days outstanding from 102 back to around 61 days fairly quickly. And we found a few other things that they could have been availing themselves of. So the last time I heard it was around 50 days, which was a lot better than 102 days. And I'm sure made the bank manager a bit happier. What about cash flow? Is there any issues to do with cash flow you could ask your client? Has he got some concerns that there might be problems later on? Is the business undertaking activities which are draining cash, which might be a major research and development project, it might be capital expenditure? Or is the problem being caused because key suppliers are coming from overseas and the shipping times are taking longer because of the wars, which unfortunately are breaking out around the world, and ships are taking longer trips? And that's meaning the decision's been made to increase inventory in Australia. So what's that doing to cash flow? And has your client got any thoughts on trying to raise capital? And in most cases, you get a bit of a surprised look and say, well, can I raise capital? Yeah, if you're a company, you can raise capital. Might be the opening statement. And if your turnover is under $20 million, you can use crowdsourced funding equity raising. Obviously, if the turnover is over $20 million, you'll be looking at other alternatives, such as venture capital investors, but it can be done. So you start having those conversations. Now, you might not hit a pay dirt result immediately, but you have planted in your client's mind that you do understand these issues, that you can help him or her to overcome their problem. And that's why the budgets and cash flow forecasts, which we call the predictive accounting reports, are so important, because they're the financial interpretation of the business plan, which you can then sit down and be the storyteller. Say to your client, this is what this business is going to look like in 1, 2, or 3 years' time. I think it's a bit dangerous going beyond 3 years with an SME, especially the first time you might go through and do these types of exercises with them. But you need to be communicating with your client on a broader range of issues than taxation. What about the risk management strategies that apply in the business? What are the risks? Have they got a list? And go through them with the client. Do they understand the personal property securities register? Is this a real active area that they should be closely involved in? Gets back to who they're dealing with, doesn't it? And analysing. Succession planning. What's your client's views on succession? Are they wanting to sell the business? If so, you could inform them that it's not a good idea to just wake up one morning and decide they're going to sell the business in the next 2 months. It's probably a lot better to plan when they're going to sell the business, maybe a year's time, and they get everything shipshape in the meantime so they can maximise the return? And what's the position going to be with the continuing staff? Are they prepared to continue? Are they well trained? Can they perform their jobs if your client's not there? Or is he needed to be there or she needed to be there to drive them time and time again? And you can have that discussion with them about succession planning. And it might be that they have a son or grandson or granddaughter that they're keen to bring into the business. What sort of preparation process should they go through? Do they understand the industry? Do they understand the business? Perhaps your firm could do some mentoring and coaching for that person in a whole range of activities. One of the big issues is the 52-week business enhancement system, which hopefully your client's already implemented, but perhaps not if you haven't been talking to them about these issues. Because this is a rather new terminology for Australian small businesses that ESS BIZTOOLS at least are really talking to people about. Because businesses operate 52 weeks, 365 days of the year in the main. Some of them take out a few, but even when they're having so-called off-seasons, I tend to find there's a hive of activity going on in repairs and maintenance and new capital expenditure and what have you in the business. So money's still being spent, costs have been incurred, timesheets have still got to be completed. And what we're going to get from this is a system whereby there's a daily report. So you explain to your client why this is so beneficial. I'm not suggesting that you're going to prepare it every day, but you'd set the system up and train the person within the client's organisation that's going to prepare it. Just make sure you're on the distribution list. So you or someone in your team gets that report each day and can quickly read it. And if it looks like there's a problem, you're alerted. You do something about it. But that daily report's going to look at what happened yesterday. Was there a problem? That's number one. Number two, what was the sales? What was the gross profit percentages? What were the key yields? If they're in a business that measures yields like the meat industry does and others. What's the bank balance? What's the debtors balance? What are the big bills to be paid this week? Do we have enough money? Memo to the leadership team. Get out there and get those debtors payments in. So we've got the money to pay these major creditors. Then on a weekly basis, we've got the weekly performance and profitability reports. Vital information to help your clients survive. I've seen it over the years where people have worked as managers in larger corporations that have been switched on this weekly performance and profitability reporting process. And they've then left that employer and gone out and started their own business, basically in the same industry. They've started a small butcher shop. And over the years, I've spoken to a few of them who've rang me up and said, well, you want to be our accountant? I'd go to them and I'd sit down and I'd say, okay, well, the weekly performance and profitability reports, oh, no, we're not doing that. So what do you mean you're not doing it? No good. I said, well, no, I'm not interested. If you don't want to do it, I'm not going to be your accountant, because I know how important it is. No. Unfortunately, on the two occasions that conversation actually took place, both of those guys did not last 6 months in business. Why? Because that very important protection was pulled away. So here we are advising SMEs on taxation matters, but very rarely do we have that sort of conversation, do we? And we wonder why SMEs are failing. They need our input. We need to cost it out accurately. It's going to cost $20,000 to $40,000, I think, minimum to offer these types of services, but we need to be brutal about it and upfront. We need to make sure that accurate budgets have been prepared in the first instance when people are contemplating going into business, and refer them to the Australian Small Business and Ombudsman's reports about the failure rates at present and the lack of performance by SMEs to get them to appreciate why these services are needed. So that's why it all matters, and it matters now, because there's also changes happening in accountancy, isn't there? Big changes. We had the then tax commissioner, now the former tax commissioner, make an announcement at Xerocon 2022 that indicated there were significant changes occurring in how the tax office handles things, which was going to mean that there'll be less need for accountants to be communicating with the tax office. The whole process is going to change. And he suggested that accountants needed to become the trusted advisor to SMEs to offer a broader range of services. Now, he just wasn't a tax man talking. He was a former partner at KPMG, which, whilst it's a Big Four firm, he understands the basics of accounting. And then 6 weeks ago, I had the privilege of participating in a series of webinars over 2 days on AI. And one of the key presenters was a former Sydney sole practitioner, Mr. Wickerham, who is now a senior consultant for ChatGPT and an AI expert, and also runs a value-adding business out of London, servicing accountants worldwide. He said he said compliance services, as we know it at present, will not exist by the end of the decade. That's only 5 years away. So we've got the tax commissioner and an expert in AI. He's been a sole practitioner of a Sydney accounting firm that he left in 1999, offering these judgments. I think there's a lot of changes. And accountants need to be taking the opportunity now to start the journey into a new supply chain of services for SMEs. And we're fortunate because the SMEs need this support. I'll leave that challenge to you. ESS BIZTOOLS has got a full range of products. We're adding to it every month. Please visit our website, www.essbiztools.com.au, and we'll be happy to hear from you. And if you would like a 40-minute complimentary webinar with me, with you and your colleagues in your firm, or your whole firm if you want to, we can arrange a webinar to do that. Just send me an email, please, peter@essbiztools.com.au. Stay safe. Have a great day. Goodbye.